Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome everyone to our open forum for questions and answers, our monthly forum. Inshallah, this will be the last one before Ramadan, or maybe that's not true. Maybe we will have one more before Ramadan. Anyway, but there are a lot of Ramadan associated questions. There are quite a few questions in tonight's session. Some of them, several of them are quite, will require a little bit more explanation than I usually give. So we'll try to give them their due right, but a lot of them are just simple. So we'll also breathe through those, inshallah. Okay, so without, these are again anonymous questions. I don't know who sent them, and without any in just a random order. The first question: can you explain the significance of the 15th? Can you explain the significance of the 15th of Sha'ban? And is it a sunnah to fast on that day? Are there any special prayers to observe on that? The 15th of Sha'ban, or the eve of the 15th of Laylatul Nisfu min Sha'ban, the eve of the 15th of Sha'ban, meaning the night before, is a night that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke about. And there are several hadith traditions to that effect, that basically the sum of those hadith mean that the orders of qadr, the orders of destiny, the things that have been written for the year, descend from the preserved tablet, al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, and are given to the angels and sent out for distribution. And it is a sunnah to fast the day of the 15th, and it is a sunnah that the eve of the 15th that we engage in acts of worship. And there is a sunnah dua, which you can find on my website. I have it for you in Arabic, English, and transliteration, which is the dua comes from various sunnah traditions. And at the very least, do that dua before you sleep. The dua is like, it will take you one whole minute to read. It's not that long. And if you are able to fast on the following day, you're able to fast, because this is a day that prepares us for what will come, which is the month of Ramadan, especially Laylatul Qadr. It's also the Prophet ﷺ, and these type of celestial events would take place, like the idea of the Qadr being distributed, etc. He would like to be in a state of fasting. And so because we are now in the month of Sha'ban, it's right around the corner. What is the significance of i'tikaf? Are women allowed to do i'tikaf at ICCP if we stay at the Chapel Rose premise? Are we allowed to do i'tikaf? Will it qualify, or is it distant from the main mosque? I'tikaf is a meritorious act. It is an act that the Prophet ﷺ himself engaged in even before he received revelation. I'tikaf is, now there's a difference of opinion if i'tikaf has to be associated with fasting. In the Hanafi madhab, it has to be associated with fasting. But in the Shafi'i madhab, it's a standalone thing. So in the Shafi'i madhab, if you're going to the mosque for anything, you can just intend, okay, the moments that I'm going to be in the mosque are moments of i'tikaf, and you'll be rewarded as such. As it comes in the month of Ramadan, as it comes to the month of Ramadan rather, it is a sunnah that the last 10 days one engages in the spiritual retreat, i'tikaf, as was the custom in the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, part of the conditions of i'tikaf is that it has to be in the mosque, al-masjidiyya, that's one of the conditions. So in the case of Chapel Road, because it is not part of ICCP formally as part of the masjid, it would not count as i'tikaf. The i'tikaf would have to take place in the mosque proper, because that's one of the conditions of i'tikaf. However, when it comes to women specifically, in the Hanafi madhab and in one of the positions of the Shafi'i madhab, it is permissible for a woman to perform her i'tikaf in her home musalla. If there's a place in her home that she usually uses for prayer, according to that opinion, it is permissible for her to engage in i'tikaf in that space, which is something for women. So that's an easy one to solve. I thought a lot about the Chapel Road and things like that. And you know, when it comes to Attica, the condition of it being a mosque, you have to just come back to the legality of the properties that we have. And because of the way the legality is structured, we would not consider the Chapel Road property to be a part of the mosque from the point of view of, you know, things like this. But there's also advantage for it not being part of the mosque proper, because there are certain rules that we have with mosques that will not apply to that property, and therefore there are some we can get more use out of that property accordingly. Now that might change in the future, and then we can revisit this issue. Okay. The ICC barn is the property of ICCP. Okay, sorry, there's a follow-up question is, can you do the i'tikaf in the barn? You know, I would come back and say, no, we would have to do i'tikaf again in the mosque itself, because that would be, yeah, we would have to do i'tikaf in the mosque itself. And in that regard, our mosque is on the smaller size. I mean, the musalla part of the mosque is on the smaller size. So that would, you know, put some restraints to the number of people. Inshallah, when we have the activity building up, we will be able to increase that. Do we break our fast or ablution by taking a drop of blood for sugar test? You mean if you prick your finger, that's an intramuscular injection, like the prick is intramuscular. That wouldn't break, none of that breaks your ablution, but that wouldn't break your fast. But if you drew blood from a vein or an artery, that would break your fast. So intramuscular injections do not break the fast. Intravenous injections break the fast, because the veins and the arteries are considered part of the body cavity. So anything that is introduced inside the body cavity from outside, that's the definition of the fast. So if it's just a prick like on your finger, you know, like you have to, you know, for the blood sugar test, that would be okay. Is it all right for me to follow the Imam at Taraweeh by reading the specific chapter or page he is reciting? You can have the Quran in your hand, you can have the Mus'haf in your hand, and you can follow along. There is an opinion that allows that. And this comes from Zakwan, who was the servant of Sayyidah Aisha, alayhi salam, and he used to lead her in Taraweeh from the Mus'haf. And based on that, the Shafi'is took that it's permissible. Was it Zakwan? No, Zakwan. Okay. Can I wait until, can I wait? Yeah, I think it's until. Can I wait until the adhan is said for Fajr to start my fast? No, the minute you hear the mu'adhin say the first letter of the adhan, the hamza of Allah, Allah, the minute he says that, that is when the fast begins. Now, of course, we don't live in a Muslim majority country where we are just relying on the adhan outside. We have a timetable. So whatever the time is for Fajr, let's say 10, 15 seconds before that time is when you have to stop eating and drinking. And that's when the fast begins. So for the adhan, for any prayer, for the adhan to be valid, it has to be said by the mu'adhin after the actual time of the prayer has occurred. In the Muslim majority world, what they have done is that in the timetables that the mosques follow, they have added in those extra seconds in the beginning. It's called a tamkeen. They've added a little bit, padded the time. So like I'm in Cairo right now. If I hear the adhan, I know that for sure the prayer time has started. In our case, because we don't necessarily have that and we are looking at the calculated prayer times, you know, we'll just stop a few moments before the published time. Now, of course, this brings up another issue, which is the Fajr time and the Isha time, because there are different calculations, because Fajr and Isha, specifically those two prayers, are calculated based on an assumed angle of the sun, either the sun below the horizon as it rises in the east, or the sun below the horizon in the west as it continues its journey. I mean, from our perspective, that is. So the different angles, there are different fiqh bodies that have different angles. Now, you will notice that there can be great discrepancies between the Fajr and the Isha times, because each degree that the sun moves is 4 minutes. So if there's a 10-degree difference, that's 40 minutes. There'll be 40 different minutes. Now, I personally have my view on the correct angle for the Fajr time, and I haven't necessarily made this a big deal at the mosque, because it is a little bit of a matter of ijtihad, and therefore I don't want to create a fitna or something like that. But since the question, this is the second type of question I've gotten in the last year that has to do with the Fajr times, I think it's important to mention that. Okay, so again, just to summarize, as far as the question goes, before the published time of Fajr, that's when you have to stop eating and drinking, and you will begin your fast. Now, just another point. Maybe the questioner is also thinking of another issue which happens, which is that in some Muslim majority regions, there is an adhan before the Fajr, which is the adhan of the Qiyam. Like, I go to Amman, Jordan frequently, and they do the Qiyam Fajr. So maybe 20 minutes before Fajr or something like that, there's an adhan. And I remember my first night in my recent trip, I was like, wait, is that Fajr? But the app says it's not Fajr. And then I noticed he didn't say as-salatu khayrun min an-nawm. I was like, this is the adhan of Qiyam, to wake people up for Qiyam. That adhan, it's like an alarm clock. So and Bilal used to, and some of the mu'adhins of the Prophet ﷺ used to do that. That adhan is to wake people up. That's different. That's not pinned to the time of the prayer. It's just a way of waking people up. That's okay. You can eat and drink through that if you are in a region that has that adhan. But you got to make sure. So you have to understand what's going on. Okay. Is there a special significance in breaking your fast with eating dates? Some say that the Prophet ﷺ ate 7 dates, etc. The Prophet ﷺ said, if one of you breaks your fast, let them break your fast with dates, and if they can't find the dates, then with water. It's narrated in Dawood and other collections. So the sunnah is to break our fast with dates, water, and an odd number of dates, because the Prophet ﷺ used to like to do those type of things in odd numbers. So that's where it comes from. And there's also a lot of health benefits to the nutrients and the contents of the date itself. On an empty stomach, there's a lot of nutrients. But don't say, oh, he liked odd numbers, I'm going to eat 21 days. I mean, don't overdo it. Just have a few dates, inshallah. We are told that there's a special time between Asr and Maghrib in Ramadan that du'as are heard. Is there a hadith? The time between Asr and Maghrib in which the du'a is answered is on the day of Jummah. The Prophet ﷺ said that there's a time on Jummah by following the different hadith, it's between the Asr and Maghrib time. So that's a time that we seek out to make dua. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, وَحَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَاةِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Allah Ta'ala advises us, admonishes us to keep the middle prayer. And the middle prayer is the Asr prayer, because it's in the middle of the day and it's in the middle of the prayers. If you look at from the night before from Maghrib to Maghrib, or if you look at it from the day, a lot of the ulama understood that to be the Asr prayer. Some people said it's Fajr prayer. But if we go with the Asr prayer, then it's a special time. And the reason it's a special time, it's a time that most people are absent-minded of. People are not thinking, just like the early morning, most people are not up in the morning and out and about. So those times tend to be blessed times. Is it better to have Eid prayer very early on Eid day? Is it the practice in some countries to have Eid prayers in open air? So it's a sunnah to pray out in the open for Eid if the elements allow us, so if it's snowing outside and it's minus whatever, no, we're not going to pray outside, we'll die. So this is just, if the weather permits, then yeah, we can pray outside because that's the sunnah. I think last Eid al-Adha, last summer, we prayed inside because it was raining, because the weather didn't permit, and so on and so forth. So again, these things are with the compatibility of the physical elements. As far as the Eid time being early, what is the time of the Eid prayer? Right, the time of the Eid prayer is after the sun rises, the shuruq, until before Salatul Dhuhr. So that's the time that you can pray Eid. So because of that, in many Muslim countries, right when the sun rises, that's when they do the Eid prayer. I personally prefer that because you get up and you go to it, and so on and so forth. I know as society changes and as people's personal and daily habits change, people seem to prefer the later Eid time. And it is unfortunate that in many places, because the Eid prayer is considered early, many people will not pray Salatul Eid because they've been up partying the night before or whatever, and they miss it and things like that. That's another issue altogether. That's a social issue. But the issue is, when is it permissible? It's from the time that the sun rises, meaning the end of Fajr prayer, before Dhuhr prayer, that's the time that we can pray Eid. And in our mosque, we have taken advantage of that, and we have provided a little bit of cushion of the time to make it appropriate, not because people are lazy, but because people work and people go to school and things like that. So we've tried to find times that we think are compatible with the American daily schedule, more or less, using the knowledge that we have this range to pray it. If I vomit accidentally, is my fast invalid? No, the act of vomiting itself doesn't break your fast, but if anything comes back into your mouth after it's exited, sorry to be disgusting, that would break your fast. So again, excuse me, anything that comes into the body cavity that's outside, that's what breaks the fast. My little kids want to fast half a day. Should I allow this? What do I tell them? Well, for young kids, this is how we all learned how to fast. You have to start out doing something. So fast until Dhuhr, and then fast until Asr, and then after that fast until Maghrib. So the next several years, the next maybe 15 years, the Maghrib time will be getting earlier and earlier. So it will become easier and easier, or rather the day will become shorter and shorter. The fasting day will be shorter and shorter. So it's a good time to have the kids practice. But having them practice in this way is fine, because it's very hard to go from 0 to full fasting without having gone through the exercise of, I'm going to prevent myself from eating until the afternoon time, so on and so forth. So this is a good way to get our kids to practice. Last week, a newly converted Muslim was fatally shot by the police. At the janazah prayer for him, many police officers attended. What is the ruling in praying janazah prayers if the body is not there? We have something called Salatul Al-Ghaib, the absent funeral prayer. So if the body doesn't have to be there to pray the janazah, the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed the absent funeral prayer for the Najashi in Abyssinia when he passed away, radiallahu anhu. So that's fine. And there's a spiritual practice that some of the saintly people would pray the absent funeral prayer every day for any Muslim who has died that day and no one prayed on before. So that's not an issue. And there can be multiple funeral prayers for a person. So if a well-known person or an alim or something like that passes away in another country, it would be custom that many people in different communities would pray the absent prayer. If I missed my fast due to my cycle, do I need to make it up? If so, how soon? Yes, you need to make up the prayers. You need to make up the fasting that the woman misses during her monthly cycle. She doesn't obviously have to make up the prayers, but she has to make up the fasting. And as soon as possible so that the days don't add up. Now, some of the fiqh opinions say that it has to be done before the next Ramadan, but I take the more liberal approach to make it easier for people. Just do it when you can, but you got to do it and schedule it, or else they start to add up into a number that's very large. When we pray witr during Ramadan, I usually do so soon after Taraweeh and congregation. Can I do my witr later? The Prophet ﷺ said that there can be no two witr prayers in one night. So if you're at the mosque and you're going to pray witr with us, and you know that there's the dua in the qunut of witr, and you want to catch that, that's good. And I advise people to do that. And you pray your witr, and then when you go home, you want to pray some more. After you pray some more, you need to pray 2 more witr, so that the total number of witrs in that night is an odd number. The shortest or smallest witr prayer is just 1 rak'ah. So if you went home, building on the example, if you went home and you prayed a little bit more, then you would pray 1 rak'ah, salam, salam, 1 rak'ah, salam, salam, and then that way you would have concluded your evening with a total number of odd prayers. So that's the solution to that issue. And that's a question that we get almost without doubt every single Ramadan. Another thing you can do is that when you pray the witr prayer with us in the masjid, you can intend, because we do 2 and then 1. So when you stand to pray that one last rak'ah with the imam, you can intend that you are praying 2 cycles of prayer, 2 rak'ahs, and then after the imam says salam, salam, you stand and you finish your rak'ah, and that way you haven't prayed salatul witr. So in the Shafi'i madhab, it's permissible to have a different intention than the imam in the sunnah prayers. It doesn't have to be exactly compatible in that regard. Where am I? Okay. If I pray tahajjud after I go home after Taraweeh, and having prayed witr at ICCP, do I have to offer witr again after tahajjud? That's the same question. So just make sure that the number of witr prayers in the night are an odd number, and that's easily solvable by praying 2 more individual rak'ahs with a salam after each rak'ah, to make your total number of witr throughout the night an odd number, because witr means odd, so that's the goal. My husband is morally harassing me. We have been married for 20 years. He does not pray and treats me badly, always complaining. It's really awful to live in the house. What options does a wife have under Islamic law? Well, any type of abuse from a man to a woman, a husband to a wife, physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, any darar, any abuse is a divorceable offense. And that's why Allah Ta'ala has made divorce permissible, abghadul halal, the most disliked of the permissible acts. Now, I don't know, based on the question, if it's at that level, but that's certainly an option. Another option is that you can have somebody to intervene. You can have a neutral party to intervene, to try to make sulh, to try to reconcile between them, which is usually, not all the time, but usually the go-to answer is, well, let's try to have a reconciliation, which is what we kind of call in our modern, way, a type of counseling, marital counseling, etc., to try to help solve these problems. But under no circumstances should any husband be abusive to their wife, or vice versa. Should a wife be abusive to their husband? That's haram. Allah Ta'ala says, Inni ya ibn Adam, inni haramtu dhulma ala nafsi wa ja'altuhu baynakum muharraman fala tadhalamu. O son of, and the hadith Qudsi, O son of Adam, I have made injustice against my nature forbidden. So therefore do not, and I have made it for you forbidden. So do not be unjust one to another. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Khayrukum khayrukum li ahli, wa ana khayrukum li ahli." The best of you are the best of you to your women folk, and I am the best of you to my women folk. He also said, rifqan bil qawarif, be gentle with the fragile ones, meaning women, so on and so forth. So the disposition of the man towards the woman in Islam is that the man is supposed to be kind and gentle with the woman, not rough and tough. So that's something that's very, very important. And that's something that a lot of our societies have lost, that the man tends to be very firm and difficult. And so, but that's not how the Prophet ﷺ was with women at all. And that's a sunnah that we need to revive. Anyway, so we can reconcile. If it doesn't work out, there can be divorce, etc. And if the person who wrote the question wants help, they should reach out to us directly, and either myself or Imam Rifai will be more than happy and willing to sit down and see what we can do, inshallah. I am a diabetic and need to inject insulin. Will my fast be valid? I really want to observe my fast. As we said, insulin shots, because they're intramuscular, do not invalidate the fast. That's fine. The only thing, the type of shot that would invalidate is the intravenous shot, like if you are on an IV or draw blood or something like that. Qiyamul Layl in Ramadan, can I pray tahajjud soon after Taraweeh? I need to get some sleep before Fajr and go to work. Of course, you can pray anytime you want. It doesn't have to be at the very end of the day. It doesn't have to be at the very end of the night. Whatever works for you is fine. At Ramadan, our mosque gets very crowded and we have to pray outside. If the imam is inside the mosque and we are in front of him, is our prayer valid? Yes, in our mosque, we have adopted the position of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, that the imam being the first person in the line is not a condition for the congregational prayer. In the madhab of Sayyidina Imam Malik, the Imam of Medina radiallahu anhu. And because of the necessity that we have, of course, that's his position, not shared by the other madhab. But in this case, this is a position that we adopt out of necessity, because as I've mentioned, we are confined by certain space and building requirements, etc. And the way that our property is, subhanAllah, I mean, it's a blessing that when you walk into the building, the qibla is the way it is and it works with the house. I mean, that in itself is like a divine sign, the fact that we don't have an odd qibla. But at the same time, the house has its capacity. So the people that are outside, and the way that the property is and its hills and so on and so forth, is that oftentimes the people that pray, the overflow are in front of the imam. So out of necessity, we've adopted that position, and the prayer is valid, inshallah. In Ramadan and outside of Ramadan, we've just adopted the position in general. I mean, many times when I'm doing Jummah and I stand to pray, when I look out the window next to where the imam prays, there'll be people downstairs or outside that are in front of me, out of necessity. Right, so that's fine, inshallah. Is there a particular month when it's better to get married? In some communities, they avoid the month of Ramadan, and most weddings are often after the month of Hajj. Because I mean, Ramadan, it's hard to have the wedding, right? Because we're doing something else, which is fasting and things like that, and that would put a burden on the couple, because they're also going to be fasting and have to show restraint, even though it's a time of happiness and they will engage in activities with one another. And then Hajj, because people travel for Hajj, so it's just like maybe a Muslim cultural thing that those months would tend to be avoided. So I think it's more about scheduling. But my advice in general is that when one can get married, to get married and not to delay that unnecessarily. Can you speak to the various categories of zakat so that we could be guided this Ramadan? Also the fitrah, if I were to spend to give a young lady in marriage, if I were to spend to give a young lady in marriage, say by way of giving the dowry, will it qualify as zakat? Okay, the zakat verse is the verse in Surah At-Tawbah, which enumerates for us the categories of zakat, the 8 categories of zakat. So Allah Ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. Those are the 8 categories. So al-fuqara wal-masakin, the poor and the needy, are 2 different categories. The fuqaha, they give different opinions, different definitions of them, but the standard definition is that the faqir is better, has more than the miskin. The poor needs 100 every month and they have 80. The miskin needs 180 every month and they have 20. So they're both below the threshold of what they need, but in varying degrees. So those are 2 categories. Al-fuqara wal-masakin wal-amilin alayha, those who distribute the zakah, because the zakah is not something that takes place once in the year at the same time for everybody. Everybody has their own zakah calendar, because the minute you come into possession of zakatable wealth and money, you begin counting the year from when you take possession. So therefore, throughout the year, at any given day, any given week, people will be paying out their zakat. So al-amilina alayha, those that distribute the zakat, it's a full-time job, because there's also zakat on livestock, there's also zakat on fruits. It's not just gold and silver and money. So people that have, in our community, not that I know of, I don't think we have any farmers, but people that have certain type of livestock or are have certain types of fruits, they're going to take some of that and give it to zakat. And then people that are traders, urud al-tijara, people that trade on items, they buy item A and they sell item A unprocessed, they trade it. Those people also have to pay zakat on those trade items. So therefore, all throughout the year, there will be people paying zakat. So there has to be a set of people whose responsibility is to collect that and distribute that. So those people themselves, they can be paid their salary from the zakat. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ, those whose hearts are to be reconciled. These are different groups of Muslims. These are not non-Muslims, because zakat cannot be paid to non-Muslims, but these are groups of Muslims whose hearts need to be reconciled, such as somebody who has become Muslim but their iman is weak, and supporting them financially will help them. Or somebody who has converted to Islam, their iman is sound, but they are a prominent person in their community. So giving them that wealth would be a way of increasing goodwill or the dawah, etc. Or, so there are 4 subcategories. The third one is a group of people, a group of Muslims, who supporting them financially would help ward off a neighboring enemy. In other words, it would offset the necessity of the state to raise an army to fight the enemy. And related to that, the 4th category is supporting a group of Muslims who are placed physically, strategically, etc., to fight with those who have prevented paying the zakat, and by offsetting the balance sheet of the state, supporting them would be easier than the state fighting them. And those 4 subcategories you won't find those in normal books of fiqh. You kind of have to search the longer books. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, those who are in bondage, who are purchasing their freedom. وَالْغَارِمِينَ, those who are in debt, they can take from the zakat, we can pay those who are in debt to get out of their debt. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ is traditionally understood as jihad fi sabilillah, a type of struggle, legitimate struggle, fi sabilillah. For the jihad to be a true jihad, it has to be tahta raya, it has to be under a political banner, the Prophet ﷺ said. In other words, it's not this like vigilante stuff. It has to be a formal declaration of war by a duly constituted state, and it has to be solely for the purpose of defending the faith. Not we're camouflaging what we really want to do and saying we're defending the faith. No, it's like our faith is being attacked. Brothers and sisters are being persecuted just because they say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and therefore we're going to support them. Which is, and I say that because we don't have those type of conflicts much anymore, unless we're going to go free people that are being persecuted, because they're being ethnically cleansed because they're Muslim or something like that. But that's the condition for it to be fi sabilillah. Now, some of the Salaf argued Fi sabilillah. Can fi sabilillah, is it only bil silah, by arms, or can it be done through al-lisan? Can it be done through the tongue? In other words, is there another type of form of jihad other than armed conflict? So Al-Qaffal from the Salaf said, yes, it can also be bil-lisan. Why is that important? Because in the modern condition, many people will ask, and I think it's one of the questions that will come later, many people will ask, can you give zakah to the mosque? Now, if you see so far all of the categories, these are all people. You can't give zakat to brick and mortar. It has to be to people. The Prophet ﷺ said, take money from the wealthy and distribute it to the poor. Take it from people and give it to people that need it. So some of the modern ulama will argue, now this is a position, I have to be fair, that I do not follow myself, but it is a position that's there and the mosque has chosen to follow it, which is its right to follow. And this is an issue of ijtihad, and so on and so forth. They will argue that a mosque in a non-Muslim community that provides vital services, in other words, without the existence of this mosque, there would be no way for Muslims to learn their deen, so on and so forth. That is a form of jihad fi sabilillah, which is true. I mean, that I'm not going to argue with. And therefore, they will say, based on that, you can give your zakat to the mosque. Fi sabilillah, wabin is-sabil, the person who is traveling, who is stuck from traveling, and needs money to get to their destination. Okay, so those are the categories of the zakat. The target is that we give to at least 3 of those categories if we can. Now, some of these categories we're not going to find, like we're not going to find people in bondage, alhamdulillah. Well, I hope we don't find people in bondage and things like that. But we try to give to at least 3 categories. Now, the questioner, let me just find the question again, but the questioner said something about a dowry, etc. But no, that wouldn't count. If you're getting married, you can't give your wife her dowry based on the zakah, because that's an obligation of the marriage contract. Yeah. Okay. When it comes to zakatul fitr is something else. The zakatul fitr is obligatory for each one of us, old and young, man and woman, that needs to be paid before Salatul Eid, the 1st of Shawwal, which is the day of Eid al-Fitr. Its obligation, that's when it needs to be paid by the latest. It's permissible to pay zakatul fitr from the very beginning of Ramadan. And every Ramadan I say this, my advice for myself and for you is that the first night of Ramadan, you go to the mosque for Taraweeh, and tomorrow is the first day of fasting, pay your zakatul fitr right then and there. So you don't forget. What is zakatul fitr? It's a sa'. It's 2 kilograms of food, staple foods of that region. Staple foods are different types of food: wheat, grain, nuts, beans, whatever the staple, rice, all of those have different prices. So we approximate the price, we say like $12 to $15 per person, basically. That's where we get the number from. And why am I saying paid in the 1st of Ramadan? Is so we have a chance to distribute it to the people that need it. But if you come and you give it to me, and I'm about to stand and give the khutbah for Eid, I'm not going to be able to distribute it before I start you've maybe checked the box that you've done your obligation, but we've also not having a chance to give it to the person who needs it. So my suggestion is that all of us make it like a personal sunnah, personal custom, that when we go to the first Ramadan, first Taraweeh of our Ramadan, might be the first, second, third night, whatever, we take with us the money for zakatul fitr and we put it in the zakatul fitr box. So that's a different type of zakat. Okay. As our mosques in the US are not supported by the government, can I contribute my zakat to the mosque so that they can promote Islam? As I said, as long as the mosque is providing vital services, which obviously all mosques are supposed to, but you know what I mean. In other words, we can make an argument that, without this mosque, my kids can't learn Islam, they're not going to learn how to pray, the basics, the furud, then according to that opinion of the Salaf, that would be permissible. And that is the position that the mosque has adopted. Can I use zakat funds to support scholarships? No, now we're getting off into the off the beaten track. It has to be for the categories that we mentioned. Okay. Montgomery County Public Schools has approved a selection of LGBTQ inclusive texts to be read in the classroom in elementary schools. They are not offering any forms of options to parents to see if they want to opt out their children to be part of these readings, like they offer options to opt out to teach family planning. How do you think we should respond to this? Or what steps can we take as a Muslim community to see if we can get the option to opt out? I am, as a parent, very disturbed by it. Resist. That's what we need to do. We need to resist. We need to apply pressure. We need to speak. We need to find other like-minded communities, not necessarily Muslim communities, but other religious communities, because that's problematic on so many levels, because they are trying to teach our children something that is outside the confines of logic. That's the problem with it. It's not that there are it has nothing to do about respecting other people. We respect all people, and our mosque is open for all people. That's different. But you can't come and tell me that 1 + 1 is no longer 2, and you can't come and tell me that I'm no longer a man. I might be a woman, or there are 16 other genders. There's not. There's only 2 genders. وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ ذَكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. Allah Ta'ala says specifically in the Quran, subhanAllah, I have created the 2 genders, male and female. So, I mean, that's beyond the confines of simple logic. If somebody came to try to teach us, maybe we can find another example that's just so crazy but it's not controversial. But if somebody, came to teach us, that America is the oldest country in the world, and it's 10,000 years old and it has a continuous, it's just not true. That's just not a true fact. It's one of the newer countries. It was discovered. We talk about the discovery of America. It's a historical fact. This is a biological, scientific fact. Nothing will ever change that. Nothing will ever change the usage of the English language of he and she, of male and female. You have thousands, thousands of years of human language across different language groups. It's established that this is what these words mean. You can't come now and change that. That's not how language works. They will try to change it, but you'll need like another 10,000 years of human life to agree to that change for it to actually take place. So when it comes to something like this, we have to resist. We have to resist within the confines of the law. We have to resist by making noise. We have to resist by applying pressure. This is when we need the type of political pressure that people will talk about Muslims getting involved in politics. This is one of the things that we need to get involved in. You go to the county executive, or I don't know, whatever, the head of the MCPS, and say we have concerns about this. At least there should be an option. There's an option for the family planning, so on and so forth. So resistance can take different types of forms. I'm not talking about picket signs and vandalism. That's not useful, and the vandalism part is haram. I'm not talking about that, but there needs to be some type of civil disobedience and resistance when it comes to that. As simple as that. Don't let what's being said at school and publicly change the fact that wrong is wrong. When it comes to this issue, it's just wrong. I'm sorry. It's just as simple as that. There's nothing that we can do about that, because it's something beyond even religion itself. It just has to do with human logic. Now, when it comes to the readings, I don't know what those books are, so I would be interested if somebody can bring me some of those books. It'd be nice to look at them. But some of those books might just make allusions, might make references, might not be as bad as people might think it is. I'm talking here about the specific type of books, and then that can be dealt with differently by how we read them to our children and how they are discussed. But in general, when it comes to that kind of stuff, my opinion is that we need to resist, and it will be uncomfortable and it will be difficult. But it's one of those things where it's one of those moments where you have to, stand for the truth, and there will be other people that are standing for the truth that are also timid to stand for the truth, and we need to work in association with them. Can I listen to the Quran, to Quran recitation and recite dhikr while breastfeeding, or do I need to be covered in hijab? No, that's fine. You can listen to the Quran. There should be nothing that prevents you from having a relationship with the Quran. I work as a psychologist, and I'm coming across patients who are identifying as transgender. even some Muslim clients. I want to do my best. Sorry, I want to do my job and help them emotionally. And at the same time, I don't want to show support for their trans or gay identity. Can I still work with these clients, or should I refer them out? It really depends on what's being asked of you. If somebody comes to you with us, like they have insomnia, I'm just making this up, they have insomnia, but they're gay. That's one thing, because you're addressing the insomnia part. But if somebody comes to you because they're gay or transgender, and they come from a Muslim family, or they identify that they're Muslim, and they're coming to you specifically about this issue, I'm assuming at some point you're going to come to some kind of ethical conflict between your obligation as a healthcare provider and your obligation as your personal belief. So when you feel that there is that conflict, that's when I would say you can refer them out, because you don't want to lose your license and do something unethical. You also swore an oath. If you're a physician, you swore a Hippocratic oath not to do no harm, etc. And we are a people that follow our oaths and our conditions. So therefore, it would be safer in that case to refer them out. So there's a little bit of subjectivity to it, because it depends what the person is coming to you about. Also, this is something that I need to be more educated on. I need to know what the latest guidelines are for healthcare providers for dealing with these people. I'm assuming that, but it's just an assumption. I'm assuming that you can't make a value judgment. I'm assuming that you're going to have to basically validate what they're going through, support them in their decision. So you're not really helping them. You're there to be an echo chamber. It's an echo chamber, and you're there to facilitate for them. Well, that's different. That's a different scenario. So it depends on which shade of this issue that I just mentioned you're finding yourself in. But let's abstract a little bit just to ask a general question. Can I, as a Muslim, provide a service for a gay person or a transgender person? Well, absolutely, of course, because we deal with people all the time that don't share our values or our beliefs. There's nothing haram with that. The Prophet ﷺ dealt with the polytheists. I mean, it's even worse. There's nothing worse than polytheism. The Prophet ﷺ transacted with them. So also, we're not like the cake people. Like you can't get into that thing where I'm never going to talk to a gay person, or that's not I'm not saying that at all. We respect all people, and not just that, we love all people. Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were rough and tough with people, they would have left you. فَبِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Allah begins the verse by saying, by Allah's mercy, you inclined, Ya Rasulullah, towards people. The Prophet loved people. He never made dua against the people. The people that persecuted him, he asked Allah to guide them. So that's the prophetic model. Also, at the same time, that shouldn't prevent me from saying what you're doing is wrong. So we need to also revive that dichotomy, that we can make that distinction. So what I'm saying has nothing to do about how we deal with people, with respecting them, honoring them as a human being, so on and so forth. But I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm going to validate when somebody does something wrong. If someone does something wrong, it's wrong. Just like when I do something wrong, you need to tell me I did something wrong, so on and so forth. Okay. I think the rest of the questions are a little bit easier. According to the Hadith Bukhari, when a man dies, his good deeds come to an end. Well, not a man, anybody, except 3: ongoing charity, beneficial knowledge, and a righteous child will pray for him. Then, if someone else prays for my deceased father, would this benefit him? In Bangladeshi culture, family members arrange a dua gathering on the 4th day and a feast on the 40th day. Are those beneficial? Okay. Oh, why does it say only the prayers of a righteous child? What about the prayers of a righteous parent or the child, even if the child was not religious? No. Any khalaf, anybody that's left behind, anybody that makes dua for their brother and sister that have passed, that benefits the person that has passed without doubt. The Prophet ﷺ is just highlighting categories. So, waladun salih yad'u lahu, a pious descendant, or a pious member of the community. It's like a category. It's not necessarily verbatim that person. As far as fourth day, 40th day, etc. All of those type of things. Anything that we do when we come together to honor the person that has passed away by remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing good works in that person's name, without doubt benefits that person. So these are just cultural manifestations of a truth that we believe in, is that death is not the end of life, and that when the person dies, those that are living, that are left, we do what we can for them by remembering them, making dua for them, reading Quran for them, doing charitable works in their names, so on and so forth. If I miss any mandatory salah despite my best effort, for example, I am not able to wake up in the morning with multiple alarms, what should I do? Well, you should try to sleep earlier, number one. Waking up early is a function of sleeping early. So it's a matter of training the body. And to train the body, you need to train the body gently. Okay, so you can't just automatically, snap your fingers and then you're able to do it all. But you have to change your habits slightly towards the goal, which in this case should be sleeping early and waking up early. The other thing about waking up early is that you can recite the last 3 verses of Surah Al-Kahf. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي, etc. until the end of the surah. I think it's the last 4 verses then. So the last 4 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, and then after you recite those verses, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you get up in time for Fajr. As far as what happens if this happens, you just pray what you missed. You have to pray the miss. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Prayers are prescribed upon us, so therefore we have to pray them. Okay. We are a practicing Muslim family. Recently, a boy we don't know has expressed interest in our daughter through one of her friends. She's in college, and so is he. By her friend's account and his own, he prays and fasts. My husband and I are unsure of how to proceed or what to tell our daughter. If they meet at a cafe, for instance, should a third person be with them? What should the parameters be? Any advice on how to proceed would be much appreciated. What are the steps to engaging in a Muslim marriage? Is it talking, then Fatiha engagement, then Katb Kitab engagement, then wedding and full marriage? During the Fatiha period, what does this mean for the couple? Can they go out alone in public places like restaurants, museums, and cafes? Well, first of all, you need to involve the boy's parents if it's genuine interest. So that adds a little bit of a level of responsibility, because like let's say you ask to meet the parents or something like that, or they want to come and visit, and then it doesn't happen, or he keeps giving excuses. So maybe he's just expressing his own feelings, which are probably genuine and natural, but he has no way of backing them up. So I would try to look at that. As far as the parameters, until people do the kitab, until people do the actual nikah ceremony, they're not married. So even when they're engaged, there can be no physical touch, they can't be alone, there can be no intimacy, etc. All of that would be haram because they're still not married. Which is why I recommend that the engagement period not be prolonged unnecessarily. You hear stories when people are engaged for years, plural. That's like that's just like, it's almost like a form of torture. Just get married. So the process would be, the engagement is a type of, we are making this announcement so that people know that we are talking about marriage and that the girl is engaged, so somebody else can't come and engage her. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that we can't do that. A man can't go and seek an engagement of a woman who's already, in English we call it betrothed, somebody who's promised to somebody else. But there's no legal obligation other than that in the engagement period. But the point of the engagement is that they're going to visit each other in the home, they can't be alone, the parents are going to be involved, or older siblings or something like that. And they're talking about the marriage process, they're making arrangements, they're setting a date, they're talking about where they're going to live, how they're going to live, so on, the dowry, all of that kind of stuff. And then once all of that stuff takes place, then you do the kitab. Once you do the kitab, you're married. Khalas, that's the marriage. Because how do you undo the kitab? You undo the kitab through divorce, right? So that means that it's a marriage, it's a full marriage. And usually with the kitab, there's a type of walima or a type of gathering of people. So that's what Islam says. Now, culture says something completely different. There can be not completely different, but there can be all sorts of these cultural, I see them as false impositions that just unnecessarily imposed that make things more complicated. And you've heard me talk about this. This is one of my personal pet peeves. I do not hold to that at all. And I like to stick more to what our religion teaches because I think it's simpler and easier. Of course, we should have fun, and of course, we need to celebrate, and we call it al-farah. It's a joyous occasion, without doubt. But I'm all about making it easier for people. I don't want people to be frustrated by it. So anyway, my advice is to talk to your daughter seriously, because this is a serious thing, and she needs to know the rights, what the do's and the don'ts, and try to see if the boy's parents are interested to meet, and that will tell you the level of seriousness. Just a couple more questions, and I know that people might have some comments or questions, etc. My daughter 11 asked me, why did the earthquake happen? Is Allah punishing the bad people? So I said, no, it is a reminder from Allah about His power and that we need to return to Allah. And so we asked, why did children die? I said that every human has a set time to live. I don't know if this was convincing, or even if I said the right thing. Can you please elaborate on this topic? So you have to understand these type of calamities, we also have to understand how they relate to the hereafter. So these people that, is a tragedy of the largest proportions. I mean, there's no, it's a, the heart cries for those images. And I think there was just an earthquake yesterday, another earthquake yesterday, I think, in almost the same region. And then you think about the criminality of the people that violate the building codes and all these buildings that easily collapse, so on and so forth. There are many signs in this. One of them is, as you said, it's a sign of Allah Ta'ala's powers. One of the signs is, it's one of the signs of Yawm al-Qiyamah, that there'll be an increase of earthquake and natural calamities. But however, we also have to remember that those people who have died have, been guaranteed their place in paradise. And as I said before, when we die, the time that we experience when we die compared to the time that we experience now, every minute we experience after death will be 33 years of our human life. So our whole life will be no more than 2 to 3 minutes. That's it. So, think about it when you dream. When you dream, and you're in the dream, you might have this vivid dream, and at the moment of the dream, it feels like this very elaborate thing. And then you wake up. But actually, that actual dream that you just had took a couple of seconds or a couple of moments. So even in our own life now, we can experience this relativity that I'm talking about of time. So yes, it's a tragedy. It's horrible. We need to help them. We need to pray for them. The people that have, that are a cause of those buildings to crumble, buckle like that, need to be pursued, etc. But at the same time, let us not forget that these people will be saved Yawm al-Qiyamah. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned some type of calamity of this large scale, and he said to Sayyidah Aisha alayhi salam that many people will die, men and women and children. And she said, all of them are going to die, Ya Rasulullah. And then he said, yes, وَكُلُّهُمْ يُبْعَثُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَلَى نِيَّتِهِمْ. But all of them will be resurrected Yawm al-Qiyamah based on their intention. So the people that are good, this will be a cause of their entrance into paradise. So we don't want to forget that aspect of it as well. At the same time, we don't want what I'm saying to make us not act. No, we do need to act on a human level in any way that we can. Last question. If one is making up Fajr after the sunrise prayer has come up, can you still pray the 2 rak'ah sunnah before the Fard prayer? Yes. And if you miss Dhuhr and Asr has come in what order should you pray? Oh, sorry. If you miss Dhuhr and Asr has come in what order should you pray it? If you can, pray Dhuhr first and then Asr. But if you walk into the masjid and we're praying Asr in Jama'ah, if you follow the Shafi'i madhab, you can just follow have a different intention than the imam. If not, then you're going to pray Asr and then pray Dhuhr after that. And that would be one of those weird situations in which the prayers would be reversed. But in the default is, if you can pray them in order, pray them in order. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Does brushing your teeth break your fast? No, as long as you do not swallow the water. So don't swallow the water. And when you rinse, make sure that you spit everything out, just like you would in prayer. Just like you would in wudu. Miss the reading sessions as well. Shanaz, I don't know what that means. Is that something to me, or were you writing to somebody else? Okay.
It was just a comment about the readings, when they have scheduled the readings of the books that we were talking about. So as you said, civil disobedience that's what I just wanted to say that one could just.
The MCPS question?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, by the way, I really do want to see those books. So if somebody would be kind enough to drop some off at the mosque, inshallah, I'll be back shortly. I would like to look at them so that my comments are more accurate. Is it better to read the entire Quran during Ramadan or pray Isha in congregation followed by Taraweeh? I would do both, but I ask due to time constraints. It's better to read the Quran. If you, in that dichotomy, it would be better to read the Quran because it's the month of the Quran, and the recitation of the Quran is a great benefit. But if what I'm saying, if you end up doing that and you feel like alone, right? Because I guess that means we wouldn't see you in Taraweeh, which would be sad. Then, and you feel lonely, then coming to pray Taraweeh would be better because then you're with the group. So it depends about your disposition. For example, I remember when I was finishing my thesis at Princeton, and there were several of them, it took several years, but there were several of those Ramadans at ICCP. In the early years at ICCP, I was still finishing my thesis. And I remember it might have been like the first or second Ramadan at ICCP. I was in that situation. I had to write, and I could only write at night, and it was just this enormous academic task. And I was not able to come to Taraweeh. I think I came just once when I was asked to, every now and again. But other than that, I was at home doing my thing, finishing my thesis, and then I would read my juz for the day. So I've been in that situation. But I was preoccupied with the task, so I didn't have a chance to feel alone. But if you end up feeling like I miss the ambiance and stuff, then come to the mosque. Regarding the earlier question that came in during the engagement period, does another person need to be with the couple when they meet? Yani a khalwa is prohibited for a man and a woman. A khalwa means that a man and a woman are alone in a place in which no other person is expected. So, maybe some of my examples will date me, but like if you met at an eatery in a mall, well, that's a public place. It's not, you don't think of that as a private place, right? But if you met in a hotel room, you're not expecting anyone, right? You put the do not disturb sign or button or light or whatever. So the khalwa is when other people are not expected. So if I'm home alone and a girl comes over, then that would be inappropriate, because I hope somebody from my family will show up, but I'm alone at that moment, and then we're confined, and the door, it can be closed, and so on and so forth. So it depends on that. So the safer option in that situation is, yes, that they should be in a public place, or they should be at each other's homes under the auspices of the family. That's what I would say. Is medical malpractice lawsuit permissible? meaning you want to sue a doctor because of malpractice. I mean, that's if a doctor harms you, then you have the right to seek legal recourse. Or you are a medical professional and you need malpractice insurance. That's also permissible, because if you don't have that, you're going to die if you get sued by the person who's always coming in with a neck brace, and claiming that you did it. So it depends on which side you're on. But yeah, I mean, but don't go around suing people just to try to take money, like an ambulance chaser. But obviously, I don't think the person asking the question means that. But yes, I mean, if somebody has harmed you in a procedure and not provided the right care, then you have the right to pursue that. And I almost guarantee you that person has malpractice insurance to be able to cover that. What questions would you recommend someone ask a boy who is talking about marriage? Well, there are things that you ask directly, and then there are things that you understand indirectly. So if you ask a person, don't ask a person, are you a good Muslim or something like that? I mean, you have to determine that from how they conduct themselves. But, what are you studying? What do you want to do? How do you plan to support our daughter? Because there is a financial component. That's what the dowry is about, to be able to establish that financial component. So you need to kind of put structure to that. It's not just emotions. He's entering it emotionally, she's entering it emotionally. But you as the parent, we as parents, we want to understand, what do you plan to do in the next, immediate steps? Of course, rizq belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qadar is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything and everything can happen. But especially because the person that asked the question mentioned that they're in college. Well, if you're in college, that means, you're still in the very, very beginning of your life. So what are you studying? What kind of jobs are you looking for? Where do you want to live? Things like that. Those are the type of questions you need to see that the boy is ready to assume responsibility, financial responsibility, and also emotional responsibility, and to make sure that they're ready. All of those parts, they're ready to handle that. A lot of times people want to get married and at that young age, and they are thinking purely from the physical, sexual component. A girl has awoken that inside them. They get very excited. They want to do the right thing. So they're like, let's get married. Okay, which is good. I mean, alhamdulillah, that's a good thing, by the way. But at the same time, they need to also know, what do you plan to do about children when you're very young? How are you going to support your wife? What are you studying? What kind of employment are you looking for? So on and so forth. That's what I would ask. I wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow's halaqah with Imam Rifai will be online, because I think Imam Rifai is out of town for the day. So he will conduct the halaqah on Zoom. Any other questions?
Just a comment, Imam Tarek. At the last count, between last Ramadan and today, you have answered almost 600 questions.
Oh my God.
This might come as a surprise, but
it is
may Allah,
very much a surprise.
may Allah bless you, and also you bless Imam Rifai, because between the two of you, you cover a lot of ground. But I might also say that today we had almost 45 questions and many sub-questions, all in preparation for Ramadan. And we will invite the community to send in any other questions prior to Ramadan. And if there is a substantial amount of questions, then we might prevail on you and Imam Rifai to do even a joint session to answer a pre-Ramadan, just 2 or 3 days before, to help people to understand and appreciate the issues that come with Ramadan. We are in the customer service business, so we want our customers to be able to have their advice as needed. Having said all that, may Allah bless you and your family, Farida and the children, for your dedication.
I mean, yeah, that's a good idea. Happy to do that a few days before Ramadan. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It might be a good thing to do. There were a lot of, as you mentioned, fasting related questions, but as we come closer, there might be more. I'm happy to do that, inshallah. And wow, 600 questions, over 600. That's I was not expecting that number, but alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the strength and the fortitude to keep going, to increase us in our faith, in our practice. We ask Allah ta'ala to bless us in this month of Sha'ban. May we arrive, all of us, together safely in the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah ta'ala to accept our prayers and our fasting, our devotional works. We ask Allah ta'ala to protect our children, to have mercy on our parents, to forgive those who have passed before us. We ask Allah ta'ala to protect us from all harm, and to protect our community, and to protect our homes and our businesses and our schools. And we know that Allah ta'ala is over all things able. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون. I'll see you all on Friday, inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.